Okay, so thank you very much everyone for joining me and a variety of different guests for the third season of In Conservation With. I didn't expect this to be going on for so long. I didn't expect, to be talking to so many different people. We've had over 100 guests since we started 18 months ago during the depths and despair of the pandemic. I must say, by the way, one of our guests is currently very seriously ill in hospital. She basically had a collision with another pilot of a plane, and I've actually it's been quite a sort of a shock for us here. And it's Sasha Dench, by the way, she was single-handedly going around the UK paragliding or paramotoring to prove a point regarding the climate change crisis. And unfortunately, she collided with a camera person in her team, and unfortunately he passed. But she's seriously ill in hospital, so I just wondered if we can all kind of, think about her and send her a prayer. Okay, so here we are. This is In Conservation With. My name is David Lindo. We're sponsored by two people or two groups or two organisations, the Leica Optics, Sport Optic, and also by the Diputación de Cáceres, which is the tourism board that deals or looks after the northern part of Extremadura. And if you're wondering what Extremadura is, then you should tune in tomorrow night, because I'm actually giving a talk about it here on In Conservation With. So without any further ado, Paul, good evening and welcome along to In Conservation With. How are you, sir?
Fine, thank you very much, David. Yes.
And where are you?
I'm in Brockenhurst in the New Forest.
And you're not suffering from petrol shortages there, are you?
I think the army were round yesterday.
Oh.
So, but I gather all is well in the north of England, but not necessarily in the south, but hopefully it's improving.
Good, okay. Well, just to give you a bit of background about Paul, he's an entomologist and a scientific associate at the Natural History Museum in London, and insects has always been his fascination. We'll be learning more about his fascination with insects shortly. He's had careers in banking for more than 25 years. I'm sure you were looking at insects then as well, weren't you? Under the counter?
Definitely.
And as a business manager, and in a busy primary school. You're a business manager there, actually, in a primary school in Slough.
That's correct.
You've written a multitude of books and numerous papers. You retired early to roam the delightful New Forest in Hampshire to obviously look for insects, amongst other things. The books you've authored include several on insects, and you're also a widely published photographer. Your latest book, which is right here, is called Britain's Insects. I don't know if you can see it. It's quite a tome, and it's been published. It was published this year, actually, by Princeton Wild Guides. Paul, I mean, this is how you couldn't have written this in a couple of weeks. This is absolutely. This is how long did it take you to write this?
Probably about 2 years, but it helped by having a huge filing system for insects, because for photos, that is, because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to deal with that. And the photos have probably been taken since about 2008. Before that, I had pre-digital photos, which I basically scrapped. So I started again by chasing around looking for insects. So, and any insects I wanted to include in the book that I couldn't, luckily I could call on a number of people to actually provide photos. So that was good. The book was somewhat delayed by sort of ill health. And I think it's fair to say that publishers were perhaps producing too many books. There was a lot of pressure on them. You'll know all about their books on birds, for instance. And they've got a new one coming out on birds of Europe any day now. So they're very productive and do an excellent job on those type of books.
Well, they certainly do, yeah. I understand also, a little bird told me, even though he's been eating insects, so I don't know that you are a world authority on stick insects.
I'm afraid so, yes. They're,
Now, talk me through that. I mean, how does that work?
right, okay. Well, I describe species new to science, and I've been out to a number of countries. You know, for instance, I've written books on stick insects of Malaysia, Australia, those sort of countries. So I've enjoyed a number of trips out there looking for these insects, and it's always good fun being out. You look for stick insects at night with a torch normally, so you'll be looking at vegetation and so on. So there's usually quite a few adventures there, and hopefully find what you're looking for, including insects new to science. To give you an idea, last time I went somewhere long haul was probably Springbrook in Australia and Queensland, 2017, and by flashing a torch around, managed to find quite a few new species.
That's incredible. So I understand you've also got a couple of new species named after you. Are they what, the Paul Brock stick insect, or?
Yes, Brockeye is, you know, there are quite a few stick insects named after me. I think at least 6, including a genus as well as various species.
Oh.
But I lose track of them. I don't keep count of them, by the way.
So for someone, this is digressing slightly, but someone who wants to have an animal named after them, how do you how do you go about that? I mean, in terms of if I discovered a fly or something, would it automatically mean that I'll be named after it, or it will be named
No,
after me?
no, it's sadly it's entirely up to the author as such. So specialists will come along and describe the insect, and it's really up to them who they name it after. It could be a place name, it could be after the individual who collected it. I personally like to name them after the collectors because, you know, they've usually done a pretty good job in finding the insect in the first place, and it gives someone quite a kick really when you name an insect after them.
And these stick insects, were they pretty big? You know, because I've seen some, you know, some big ones and also ones that really do look like leaves and stuff. I mean, were they dramatic looking, or were they very quiet? Were they quite innocuous?
Well, the ones in Springbrook, for instance, they vary from fairly small prickly stick insects, covered in spines, to I think one of them was about 30 centimeters long, which is quite a surprise that you're still finding insects that size that have been undescribed, because there are plenty of people interested in Australia going out looking for these insects.
I think you're underplaying yourself. You're obviously excellent at finding things. Must be all the years as a bank person, bank manager, whatever, looking under your table, you've sussed out the secrets of finding insects.
Yeah, I'm not sure what advantage that would have given me, perhaps, but I think being able to use a torch well, and you know, to get your eye in, because a lot of these insects are very well camouflaged. So at night they're active, so hence you can normally find them. In the daytime they're just far too hidden to find most of the time.
Okay. I know you got a presentation to show us on insects. Let me just quickly ask you, are you at all squeamish when it comes to insects? Because they are a bit of a marmite animal, really, or, you know, group of animals, family, because most people absolutely detest insects, yet things like butterflies are okay, but everything else is, you know, worthy of a stamp on the head. And it was made worse. I mean, the other day I noticed that the YouGov people were putting out a poll on Twitter asking people to name their sort of least favorite bug and creepy crawly, which I thought was disgusting actually, because it's, you know, it's just giving people the license to then go and say, right, let's go and kill all the insects. What are you actually quite good with them? Can you pick up any insect you come across?
Virtually anything, but I can understand why those comments you mentioned on media upset a few entomologists, to be honest.
Yeah, that's upset me.
Yeah.
It's just really wrong. I mean, for example, I'm not a great lover of cockroaches, I must say.
I've got
Can't.
I've got a story for you about cockroaches.
That's what we like to hear. In conservation, where we love stories. Go away,
Yeah.
far away, Paul.
What I did was I went to a house in Hythe in Kent just last month, actually, looking for a cockroach, and we couldn't actually find them in the person's garden. So someone kindly opened up their back garden for us to have a look at by day. And then they suggested there might be some under the hot tub cover. Now, I'm pleased to say there were no occupants in the hot tub at the time, and lifting the cover up, all of a sudden the cockroaches starting to run around. So that was good fun. So that's a fairly new cockroach into Britain. I think it was first found in 2011. So it was quite interesting to see a couple of those, even if it was under a hot tub cover. So then a case of getting the camera out to take a few pictures.
Yeah. I mean, I was horrified. I'm in Spain at the moment, and I've not seen an insect in my house for 4 years, thanks to my cleaner. Because there were some ants in the kitchen. I just told her, but I couldn't speak Spanish very well then. I'm rubbish now, but I was terrible then. I think she misunderstood me, and she got some Chernobyl juice and killed everything. I mean, even I had a couple of geckos. Buddy Gecko and his mate were here. Everything was gone, and I've not seen a single creature since, which I'm very upset by, to be honest. But the other day, I walked into the kitchen and took my shoes off. I came in from outside, and I was aware of something sort of scuttling across the kitchen. I looked down, there was a cockroach about 1.5 inches long, and I was like completely shocked to see this creature. I won't tell you what happened afterwards, but basically that was not a nice experience at all.
Yeah, these folks in Hythe, by the way, they don't mind them being in the house. So it's not just an outdoor cockroach, this particular species. They also occur in the house as well. So, and that's the same with our other little native cockroaches in Britain, which are all nationally scarce insects, by the way. There's now probably, there used to only be 3 native cockroaches. Now there's probably about 5 or 6 species. And they also occur in houses, but nothing to worry about because they're usually pretty harmless little creatures.
Okay. Well, I think at this point, let's see if we can get your PowerPoint working. I've been instructed to kind of do a bit of a segue whilst we're having the pleasure of Paul sorting out his presentation. And I just want to say at this point that we've got plenty of other guests coming up over the next few months. I'll sort of tell you about them at the end of the program, and I'll also tell you about our membership scheme as well. So there's lots to discuss before we do our Q&A. How are you getting on, Paul?
Right. Can you see that?
No, if you press share.
Hang on.
I think I may have to bring in the venerable Maya to deal with this now. Maya, over to you.
Oh, what are you seeing at the moment? Oh.
Well, good question. I'm obviously used to this. There's a stopped video.
Did you press is there a green share button?
Yeah. I think at this point it might be good to just get you guys, you Zoomers, to think about some questions you might want to ask regarding Britain's insects, because there is such a wide variety of insects. It's unbelievable. I'm a birder, and not knowing a lot of these insects, I feel quite embarrassed by, because you kind of get billed as a naturalist, and yet there's a whole world out there that you just barely know, which I'm hoping that by looking through this book, you will be able to, I'll be able to actually catch up on that. And Penny's saying that her cat has just joined. Don't worry, I mean, I'm sure your cat would love the insects that hopefully Paul will be showing us in a short moment. You know what I'll suggest to you, Paul?
Yeah.
If you can weed transfer your presentation to me, is that possible?
Yes.
Oh, can you, whilst you're doing that, can you tell us what insects are related to? Birds are living dinosaurs. What the hell are insects? Can you multitask?
I'd better just focus on this actually, because I'm just. So you want me to transfer it? Yes.
Yeah, then I can do it for you.
That's fine. Thank you. Yeah. Let me just.
Yeah. So, question was, what is not we transfer? What are insects? Who are they related to? But I'm sure that'll be covered in your talk. David Lewis has said that Professor Adam Hart is looking for people who hate insects for study. It's interesting. It's a really interesting subject. Why do people hate insects so much? Why is it that there is this loathing of insects? Where did it come from? What's the root of it? Was it with us during prehistoric times? Did we did our ancestors have some kind of shock that has sort of, carried on through our genes that makes us jump whenever we see a cockroach, or if we hear the sound of a mosquito, which is another group of insects that I'm not particularly fussed on. We've got a few questions coming up, and I'm sure that they'll be answered later. Sarah Darwin was asking, where's the best place to purchase your book?
Right. There's various. There's either. You can still hear me, can you?
Yes. Have you sent it yet?
That's fine. I'm just trying to get on to WeTransfer. There's various companies. There's Amazon. You can look at Amazon UK and just key on Britain's insects. That will give you a number of choices. There's NHBS books, Pemberley books, those sort of places.
Okay.
Right.
And could you, whilst you're finding the WeTransfer, can you tell us about insects in terms of, as I said before, if birds are living dinosaurs, what the hell are insects?
Virtually the same, really. They're from millions of years ago. Let me just. So I'm just trying to find the file here. Talks.
So from millions of years ago, and I guess that some of them haven't changed much. I mean, a lot of these, we talked about stick insects earlier. I'm sure that they haven't changed much over the millennia.
No, people are still finding insects that look very, very similar. For instance, whether it's cockroaches or stick insects or anything, they do look extremely similar to some of the specimens now. In fact, some of them are probably very closely related. The only problem is, of course, sometimes you're only looking at fragments of insects as opposed to perhaps a whole insect.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to say we're 30% through the transfer, so something is happening.
Good. Okay. Well, we'll carry on talking about insects. So let's just get a few of the kind of general questions out of the way now, because I was going to ask you this at the end.
Right.
One question that's always bugged me is, what is a bug? People talk about bugs. What is a bug?
Right. Okay. Well, a true bug it belongs to the order Hemiptera. So each group of insects are placed in separate orders depending on their various characters and so on. So true bugs are Hemiptera. Okay. So I've tried to explain in Britain's insects what the differences are between the various insects. So for instance, under Hemiptera, where are we? Okay, I'm basically saying their mouth parts are tube-like for sucking, including an elongated rostrum, which is like a beak, which is directed backwards beneath the head. Okay, so they're rather distinct compared to a number of other insects, although some people think they look fairly similar to beetles and so on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, so
It's come now, Paul, so we can carry on. We can carry on. I'm just downloading it myself now.
thank you. Yeah.
So, okay, so why are, actually, there's a question from Paul I forgot to ask, and Paul's asking what insect takes a title for the best comeback species, i.e. from near extinction in Britain to rediscovery or re-establishment? Good question.
That's in Britain. Okay. I suppose you're looking for insects on the brink, aren't you? One of them is perhaps one from the New Forest that my sister Helen managed to rediscover, actually, which is called Sitaris moralis, which is the common name is flame-shouldered blister beetle. I think that's one of the ones I've got on a slideshow later on. But basically, that was almost extinct and has now been found in not just the New Forest, but some other places as well. So all of a sudden, that seems to be slightly expanding its range. Lots of other insects are expanding their range. There's something called a box bug, for instance, that only used to be found on box around in Surrey. That's now spreading all over the place. Just sometimes things happen with insects and they suddenly start expanding in various parts of the country, whether it's to do with climate change or other issues. At times, nobody knows.
Okay. Well, okay, we're ready for your talk now. So if you nudge me when you want to send it, move it on to the next,
Okay. Well,
all right, can you see my screen, everyone?
yeah. Do you want me to, can I sort of move this onto the next screen myself, or is that?
No, you have to tell me because I'm in control now.
Okay, so we're looking at about 25,000 species in Britain, and we're going to have a look at a small selection of them. Okay, we can go on to the next one, David.
Okay.
Okay, just so you can see some of the characters one may encounter in terms of entomologists. To give you an idea, the one on the top left is...
Sorry. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right. That's Darren Mann from Oxford Museum and his friend. And I'm pleased to say that when you're photographing insects, it's a good idea if you get someone like Darren along. He's quite into insects in dung, as you can probably see there. And what he's doing is basically finding the beetles and then sitting them on the dung for me to photograph. So that makes it pretty easy. And on the bottom right of that picture, we've got, it's almost like letting paint dry here. We've got entomologists who have basically collected some water from a pond or temporary pool. They're looking for, you can see a little beetle on the top right hand, on the right there, insect. That's called a baghouse weevil. After about 20 minutes, they may decide to come to the surface of the water because they're semi-aquatic. But in case they're not, someone's obtained some vegetation from the pool. and he's looking for movement of the beetle. And again, that may take up to about 20 minutes or so. So these people need to be very, very patient. If we go on to the next one, please.
Sure.
Right, we're going to go through these quickly. I personally, when I'm out looking for insects, look for specific targets. So I'm going to look for a list of species to photograph or survey. Okay, and I'll obviously get various items of literature to check in advance to make sure I know what I'm looking for. That's one of my books there. Okay, if we go on to the next one, David. Okay, we're starting in young here. So this is a wild guides book that David's already showed. This is Arne, who is Sarah Henschel's son. Now, Sarah is, I think, conservation manager now in the Cairngorms. So this is her newly born son, and he's starting looking at insects very early, which is terrific. And I'm pleased to say the book has a logo for the Amateur Entomologist Society, and you'll see the symbol of the brimstone butterfly, and they're promoted within the book, which is a very good organisation to join. Okay, next one, please. The book shows an introduction to the orders. We were talking earlier on about the bugs. I was just checking to see if this was actually on the screen show earlier, and I see it is. So you'll see there's some notes on the Hemiptera and really how you can distinguish it from other insects. We're going to the next one, please. And examples of pages, these particular ones are the Orthoptera, grasshoppers, crickets and allies. And you'll see here that it covers information about the species, some illustrations, and in this particular case, notes on the song, because grasshoppers and bush crickets sing. And we've got something that will help you if you're using a bat detector for the song, but also you can actually use a QR code on your mobile phone and actually play the song back. So if you're taking the book in the field, that's something you can do, or you can play it when you get home. Okay, next please, David. And wild guides have plenty of other books. I'm sure, David, you'll know Britain's Birds in the top corner there. As I say, shortly it will be Europe's Birds as well, and Passerine Birds, I think, came out earlier in the year. Next one, please. I'm just going to cover really some groups of insects now from different habitats. So we'll start off with the Fens in Norfolk. So I'm going to dart about between different parts of the UK. Swallowtail is just about our largest butterfly, and so named because of its tails. And if you go to various parts of the Norfolk Fens, like Strumpshaw, which is also good for birds, you can see hopefully the whole life cycle. Obviously, if you go in about June, early July, you'll hopefully be able to see the adult. Okay, we're going to the next one, please. A rather more elusive creature from the Norfolk Broads is the fen mason wasp. Now that is endangered, was thought to be virtually extinct at one time, but still occurs in that area. They prey on weevil larvae, and you may have noticed on the picture on the right hand side, they build chimneys. So a lot of insects are quite fantastic constructors. They do some amazing things. So we're going to the next one, please. And for those who like their dragonflies, this is a Norfolk Hawker, which has been spread into some other parts of Britain as well, not just Norfolk and Suffolk. So quite an attractive large dragonfly with green eyes. On to the next one, please. Also, lots of other creatures you'll come across in Norfolk Broads. The top left, for instance, is called the red longhorn beetle. That shows a male, which is brown and black, but in fact the female is also red. Okay, next one, please. This may look like just a lump of sand there on Weyburn, I think that place is, yes. But those sort of habitats are very good for hymenopterats, bees, wasps and their allies, and this is no exception. And the picture on the bottom of your screen there shows a very small 5mm beetle, which I found at Holcombe Dunes for the first time a few years ago. And that's the type of habitat it was found in. So each insect has its own sort of preferred habitat. Next one, please. And a place like Ramparts Field in Suffolk is quite astonishing, because you'll see there from where my car was parked at the time, it doesn't look a particularly great habitat, but just by the car park there, within a couple of meters, we found some rare bugs, which are shown on the next screen. Okay, so two very similar looking bugs were found at that exact site under Storksville, literally right by the car park. In Suffolk, as well as elsewhere, you've got the hornet moth. A lot of insects will mimic other insects. So the hornet moth is totally harmless, but of course it looks something like a hornet. So it's basically trying to protect itself. So a predator, such as a bird again, or an animal, may decide not to eat it because they think it's packs a sting, as in a wasp or hornet. Okay, next please. In the New Forest National Park where I live, I tend to survey by habitats. Obviously, a lot of people enjoy just going to a site and seeing what they can find. But as I say, in my particular case, I'll particularly look for some special insects I'm looking for. Next one, please. So we'll start off with the woodlands, and we'll very quickly go through various woods. The best habitats in the forest tend to be ancient woodlands, such as Denny Wood, which is shown on the bottom left, where you've got some very old trees. The big beech tree, or beech trees there, are extremely old. And I'll show you some special insects that I found there shortly. So if we check the next one, please. The cicada is one that's evaded me so far. I've seen numerous rare insects in the forest. This one has a 7 or 8 year life cycle. I'll show the next picture. It's a type of bug, by the way. Lives underground in the nymphal stage. Possibly, some people think this may be extinct now, but it was last seen in about 1992 and has periods of time where it seems to go missing. And the New Forest is such a huge place that it could easily be found somewhere. But that's one of our endangered species, potentially on the brink, potentially already extinct. On to the next one, please. Now, the goat moth is quite fascinating. It's a rather large moth. But if you see a goat moth infected tree, it means the larvae, and you'll see one on the bottom left there, are munching away on the wood inside the tree, and they produce these holes at the base of the tree, which are exit holes when they depart to go and pupate or form a chrysalis in the soil. Now, often they cause sap runs on the tree. Now, it could be an oak. As you can see from the list, it can be various other trees as well. But it smells a bit like fermenting alcohol. So you can tell a goat moth tree from some distance. And in the next slides, I'll show you some of the insects associated with these, which are some very special insects. We've got the hornet rove beetle, which is quite an attractive shiny black beetle, which is usually found at night, actually. You'll basically shine a torch and they'll hopefully be on the trees at night, as long as there's a hornet nest nearby. Very similar to a devil's coach horse, which some of you may have seen, which is on the bottom right. But devil's coach horse don't normally climb some distance up trees, as does the hornet road beetle. Next, please. Okay, variegated fruit fly, perhaps one to keep away from. You were talking about some people not liking various insects earlier, David. Well, these ones are vectors of eyeworm disease. Okay, so they're quite interesting creatures. So I found them at a number of trees with sap runs in the New Forest, and they sort of come along in a group of about 20 or 30, feed on the sap run, and then depart and maybe return in about half an hour or so. But quite an attractive little fly, even though it has quite an interesting little history. And on to the next one, please. And still on the goat moth tree, we've got an extremely rare tachinid fly here, which is an endoparasitoid, okay, which ultimately kills the goat moth larva. Okay, so there's, well, I'll talk about parasites and things later on in another slide, but as you can see from Denny Wood in the New Forest, it was found in 1900 and then again from 2011 onwards. And these have actually been reared from the larvae, but I've also seen them on the trees as well. On to the next one, please. These rather beautiful crimson underwing moths, which are both rare species, also feed on sap runs. Now you can sometimes find them by day or at night on the sap runs. I've seen them hatching out, which is the one over on the right in the middle, which has its wings like a butterfly because it's literally hatched out from the pupa and is forming its wings before it will spread them. As you can see, they're well camouflaged, but when they open their wings, they've got these stunning hind wings. The larva is on the bottom, is on the top left, or caterpillar that feeds on oak leaves. And you'll see on the right, the moth will typically sit on tree trunks, and sometimes I've seen several moths just by shining a torch to look for these things at night. Next, please. And very similar is a Clifton nonpareil, which is still an immigrant in some places, mainly in the south, but is breeding in others, including in Brockenhurst. That has blue wings instead of red and is a lot larger than the red underwings or crimson underwings. Okay, next, please. Rose chafer is an attractive green beetle, fairly common in parts of the south, also found in Ireland and elsewhere. You can see from the picture on the top right, they will lay their eggs in rotting wood, tree stumps and so on. On the bottom right, you may think that the wood ants have got yet another insect. If anyone's observed wood ants, you often see them carrying insects to their nest to be cut up and killed and used for the offspring. In this particular case, and I didn't know this, it was something I discovered when I was writing a book some years ago, the ants will carry the beetle to the nest, drop it into the nest, it will lay eggs in the nest, and the larvae help keep the nest clean. So they have a symbiotic relationship with the ants, which, to say, it's remarkable the sort of things you find out. It was known for other species, but not for this particular one. So on to the next slide, please. Very similar to the rose chafer is a noble chafer, which normally prefers orchards. In the New Forest, they tend to use other trees. We don't know whether they're oaks, hawthorns, or other old trees. Now, on the right-hand side, you'll see the noble chafer on the top, rose chafer on the bottom. Noble chafer had hardly been found in the New Forest. I'd seen them very occasionally on elderberry flowers or even on hogweed. But we tried some pheromones and they basically came to lots of different sites we didn't even know they existed. So they're obviously very well hidden in the daytime, these beetles, and hardly fly to the flowers at all. Next, please. This is a selection of click beetles, which are stunningly colourful and so called because if they fall to the ground, if you hold them, they will click and to upright themselves. So quite clever beetles, these ones. The larvae feed in wood. Next one, please. A very appropriately named beetle here. Every insect has two names. The genus is the first name, the species is the second name, and obviously with a name like Belletti, it's no surprise to see this is associated with fungi. And this one lives inside the brackets of the fungi. In the mating season, these can be seen running about all over the place. So I'll go for the next slide, please. We'll now look at some large longhorn beetles. So the Tanner beetle is one of them. That's up to 45 millimeters, so that's quite a beast, that one. Ray Mears has shown this on one of his television programs at one stage, which was almost the star of the show. Okay, we're going to the next one, please. So again, we've got sort of mimics here because they're looking to, a wasp is obviously yellow and black, and a lot of birds and other animals know they're dangerous to eat because they sting. So these will often mimic other insects. So you can see these ones, these species are quite colourful here. We're going to the next one. Longhorn beetles are so called because they've got very long antennae, as you can see here, much longer than most other beetles. And these are some more quite spectacular species found in the New Forest. A lot of these are either nationally scarce or red list, i.e. they have a conservation status. We're going to the next one, please. And this one is quite fascinating. The musk beetle is usually green, quite a large beetle, and is sometimes mauve. And the metallic appearance on that one relates to reflected light. Like many of these other things, and saproxylic or beetles associated with rotting wood are nationally scarce or red list. Now, some of the insects are quite widespread across the country. Others have a very limited distribution. Places like the New Forest and Windsor still have a number of beetles, and other insects, but some of them are not found in other areas at all. So we're going to the next slide. Scarce seven-spot ladybird. Many of you will be familiar with the normal seven-spot ladybird. There is also a scarce seven-spot ladybird, which has larger black spots, and that always lives near an ant's nest, and those are the big wood ants again. So these particular ones I've found at Boscombe on the cliff top, but they can be found in a number of places, but quite elusive insects. The ladybirds themselves like aphids. The ants tolerate them, so again there's a symbiotic relationship. So the scent of the ant is obviously acceptable to them, but I can tell you that seven-spot ladybird is not. The seven-spot ladybird will be attacked by the ants. So we're going to the next slide. Some more rare wood beetles. Now, if you were selling timber to somebody like oak, you wouldn't want to see any of these D-shaped holes in the wood from the oak jewel beetle, because that means there's a lot of problems inside that wood. And sometimes, you know, people will sell the wood and it will have all these problems, which means the wood is not particularly useful in the timber industry. Next slide, please. On to butterflies now. Pearl-bordered fritillary, which you'll see here on the top right, there's a female egg laying. And this is a beautiful species. It's called pearl-bordered because of those beautiful pearl borders, which you can see on the bottom left on the underside of the butterfly. And the caterpillars feed on violets. And they occur in the two colour forms. The one on the far right probably occurs in about 10% of the caterpillars. question is, why do they go for different colour forms? It may be to offer some protection. We're now on to spurge bugs. So this wood spurge bug will often be found in the woodland clearings on wood spurge, but it's mainly a southern species. Next slide, please. Okay, we were talking earlier about stripes, plenty of stripes on these to offer protection. Now these are crane flies as large as the brown ones you'll see around the house, quite commonly, even at this time of the year, there's plenty of them. But these are all rare, spectacular species associated with fungi or wood. So the top two are Flaviolata. The bottom two on the left, Pectinicornis. On the top right, we've got Ornata, which is probably the rarest species. Okay, we can have the next slide, please. Hoverflies, everyone likes hoverflies. Some of them are quite remarkable mimics again. On the bottom left, you've got probably the best bumblebee mimic out of the hoverflies. This one's called Pacota personata, small-headed hoverflies. So it has a small head, and you'll notice very small antennae at the front of the head. Whereas, of course, if you're looking at bees, they have much longer antennae than that. The picture next to it, in the middle on the right, shows the type of habitat, which is a typical rot hole, and the larvae will breed in those rot holes. This one happens to be about 20 foot high up on a beech tree. And on the far right is Caloprobolus speciosa, the orange-winged hoverfly, which also has orange legs. That's a mating pair there, in case you're wondering. And they are only found in Windsor Forest and the New Forest. So quite a distance apart. Obviously, years ago, they used to be found elsewhere, one would imagine, but now these ancient woodlands are so isolated, they're not necessarily found in many places. And I'll show the next slides very quickly. They are basically on hoverflies again. Again, you've got other bee mimics, not quite so good as the one we just looked at. And on to the next one, please. These are commoner species of hoverflies that you would most likely see. Again, you've got some mimics here, look something like a wasp, featuring the yellow and black warning colours. And the next, please. Oak mining bee is possibly the rarest bee in the country, and this is found in the New Forest, but going to very low numbers at the moment. You'll notice I've said that some males have big heads. They breed in the ground and basically in a communal nest. So although it's a solitary bee, lots of bees enter the nest at the same time and a lot hatch out at the same time. Now, the fact the male has big heads, we don't quite know why. Some males have normal size. Most males, in fact, have normal size heads. So we'll just check the next slide. And you can see a whole batch emerging at the same time. Now, they'll be off to collect pollen from either oak or other trees, and will then find their way back to the nest. Next one, please. Most British bees have various parasites. Now, there are parasites don't normally kill the host, such as if we look at the Nomada bee on the bottom left, which again somewhat resembles a wasp. That is called a kleptoparasite because it basically will just steal food, whereas a lot of other parasites are actually killing the larva, and they are in fact called parasitoids. So, but anyway, you don't need to worry too much about that, but a lot of these parasites will be seen around the nest of bees, and that applies not just to a rare bee like this, but lots of other bees as well. Next slide, please. Okay, heathlands, mires and bogs, very widespread throughout the New Forest, and particularly fantastic when you can see all the heathers here. So we'll have a quick look at some of the insects found in this sort of habitat. Okay, so this one is a German wasp. You can see from the picture that the queen is very large, okay, and you'll notice a comment, "Don't mess with social wasps." That came from a friend of mine, George Else, because what I did was, having seen the queen and workers and taken lots of pictures, I then saw part of the nest, because obviously the nest had been disturbed either by a bird or animal, and David might have more of a clue as to what might have actually done that. But I found part of the nest and turned it over, and you can see from the speed of some of the insects in that picture, they immediately attacked me, and I had to run like a maniac, much the same as in the picture here, through the heathland, to try and escape from some of these wasps. Okay, next picture. So the southern damselfly is extremely rare in the forest. We're going to the next one. Another rare species is the scarce blue-tailed damselfly. The southern damselfly that we looked at a moment ago is in fact quite common in the New Forest, but rare elsewhere in the country, very few localities for it. You'll see here there's an egg-laying female, and interesting, the orange specimen is an immature female before it changes colour to green, and they look rather different than the male, which is on the left. Okay, next slide please, David. Lots of Orthoptera. One of the rarest is a mole cricket, which is the bottom left, and it took me a long time to actually see one of these above ground. And one night in the New Forest, after we've been listening to singing from below ground, in fact my sister Helen managed to spot this one, so I managed to get a few quick photos of it. Next picture please. And large marsh grasshopper also likes the bogs, and this is a particularly spectacular purple form of the female, which occurs quite rarely, they're normally green or brown. This form occurs in about 10% of females, but only where populations are quite extensive. Next one, please. Okay, some cockroaches here and wood crickets, which are quite common in these sort of habitats. And next, please. Some bugs here. I particularly like the New Forest shield bug on the far right with its almost eye spot-like markings. Next, please. And heath tiger beetle. This one is rare in the New Forest, but subtly common. They can be quite common. They've even made some beds for these beetles now as a conservation initiative from the Brink project. The beds are made of soil and helps really the beetle with the correct type of habitat for breeding. And they are improving in numbers at this particular site. Next, please. They're quite good, the beetle firm. There was an interesting jewel I managed to photograph one day. So I love sort of taking behavior pictures. And this is a jewel with the buff-tailed bumblebee. The bee managed to win, and the beetle ended up quite dead, I'm afraid, having been stung. Next picture. A rare beetle that is quite spectacularly coloured. Next one. And likewise, I'll go through the next slides very, very quickly to show some of the insects. So we'll do the next one, David. Silver-studded blue butterfly is quite spectacular. On the right-hand side, you'll notice some ants clinging to the butterfly. They protect it while it's pumping up its wings after it's newly hatched. Again, and there's an association with the ants, particularly with the larvae, but as I say, they also protect the butterfly before it flies off. Next one, please. Grayling, which shows some quite interesting eye spots when it flies, and then the eye spots, as you'll see on the bottom left, manage to vanish. And the picture on the right shows a mating pair, which is a remarkable camouflage. Next, please. Beetles, lots of door beetles do the cleaning up job in the New Forest. So they will basically tidy up, get rid of the dung from lots of ponies and cattle that graze in the New Forest. Next one, please. And most people know the dark-edged bee fly, Bombylis major, which comes to flowers in your garden. There's also a mottled, spectacular mottled bee fly, which is found on the heathlands. Next one, please. Black bog ant is quite interesting and not very pleasant going in looking for these because they tend to be in the very wettest parts of the bog. So you certainly need good Wellington boots on for these, but an extremely rare species, as you can see, again endangered. On to the next one, please. This is one I only looked for this year, six-spotted crane fly in a rather damp bog again. And it was quite a challenge to actually find this fly at rest, but managed to get some good pictures in the end. And it's a tiny little fly, by the way, and flies like a ghost. So when it does fly, it's very difficult to find again. No wonder hardly anyone's ever seen them. On to the next one, please. Potter wasp is a superb builder. You can see from the pots it's building here, absolutely fantastic. They can build up to usually 4 pots together. You'll see on the top right 3 together, and it will provision them with caterpillars and basically then lay an egg, or lay, which then the larva will basically feed on that and feed on the various caterpillars that have been left there and hatch in due course into a wasp. Next slide, please. Lots of bees and wasps on the heathlands. That's just some examples. You'll see there a bee wolf, which has a terrifying name, and you'll see it's got its prey underneath it, which it's taken back to the nest, and the prey is usually the honeybee. Next. We'll have a very quick look at the purbex. We'll show the next slide, please, David. That's the purbeck mason wasp, which is a very spectacular colour. And that's restricted to the Isle of Purbeck. And you'll see I managed to photograph the wasp sort of with half its backside just going into the nest there. Next one, please. And that's a rare bee fly that is also restricted to that area. Next. So we'll look at grasslands now in the New Forest. This one's at Barmer Lawn at Brockenhurst. And the insect picture is a rare dung beetle that's only found on temporary pools. And you can see in the background some temporary pools. And if, you know, coleopterists, people that look for beetles, will actually look under the dung here and try and find these particular beetles, although they're not at all common. And it's quite a messy job. Next picture, please. More onto grasslands. This one, Buckland Rings near Lymington, where the hornet robber fly flies. Again, similar to a hornet, hence its name. It will look to pounce on prey on dung. Next picture, please. There's Exbury Gardens, and the next picture. Typical for gardens is a stag beetle, of course, particularly in the south of England. And you'll see here the person in the picture there, someone from People's Trust for Endangered Species who was doing a survey. There's a mating pair in the middle there, and on the left-hand side, the males. And what's interesting is rival males to get the female are prepared to battle with others. Hence the antlers are quite useful, and they will actually throw the loser off the wood and then claim the female. The beetles do get run over quite often though. You'll see one on the far right that's been run over on the road at Brockenhurst because they're often attracted to street lights. Next picture. Scarlet malachite is very rare and interestingly associated with thatched cottages. Onto the next, please. Various bees and wasps. I'll go on to the next one, I think, at this stage. And this is one I mentioned earlier, the flame-shouldered blister beetle, which can be associated with brick walls. And its association is with the hairy-footed flower bee. And you'll see from the arrow marked on the top right, a hole, that's where the bee nests. And the beetle will then appear, and it's quite a clumsy beetle, will sit on the brick wall. But they are extremely rare and they appear in August, but have now started spreading to other places, Lymington and some other surrounds in Hampshire and even beyond. Certainly Wiltshire, they're now quite widespread around the Salisbury area, even though they were thought to be extinct back in the 1960s or so. Next picture, please. And this is just to show the triungulins and something of the development of this beetle. Triungulins are tiny, so I needed to be quite clever to get that particular picture. Next picture. Some coastal areas, I'll go on to the next one. Okay, grey bush cricket. And the next one. Plenty of interesting shield bugs. Some of these are very colourful insects. Next, please. Shield bugs are quite harmless, actually, plant feeding insects. Coastal areas, you've also got a species here associated with salt marsh. I'll check and the next one, please. Glanville fritillary is a speciality from the Isle of Wight, and also found, or used to be found, at Hurst Castle nearby. Next one, please. And some of these soft rock cliffs have some pretty rare insects, as you can see here from Eatmouth in Dorset. Next. Another rare beetle from that area. And the next one. An interesting scaly cricket. These came over in a shipwreck at one stage from the continent and have established themselves at places like Chesil Beach, Branscombe, and also over at somewhere in Wales as well. But one needs to set pitfall traps for these to actually see them because they're nocturnal. You'll notice on the picture on the right some, I think I used dog biscuits for these ones, which were quite useful because that attracted quite a few of these crickets, which were then released back in their habitat. Next. And on prawl, you've got a longhorn bee, which is our only bee with exceptionally long antennae, which live in the cliffs here. And the next picture is the kleptoparasite that's associated with it. So these will rob the bee of its food. Next picture. A triungulin again. Triungulin is a newly hatched nymph of the oil beetle. We saw the blister beetle earlier, which is associated with an oil beetle, but this one has attached itself to a wasp. So unfortunately, when they hatch, if they attach themselves to a wasp or other insect, they don't get to the right place. They need to attach themselves to a bee to get back to the right nest. So it can be very complicated, which is why the female oil beetle will lay plenty of eggs. Onto the next picture, please. Dungeness is a fantastic place. Only just been there in September, and the picture shows David Walker on the left-hand side, who's the warden at the Bird Observatory, and he's been very helpful in showing some of these crickets. So the tree cricket's a recent arrival. Onto the next slide. If we've got time, David, for these, we'll show them very quickly. More crickets. So we go on to the next one. Spangled bottom beetle is good fun because that's found in little pools at the edge of water, and you have to sort of tread up and down, and that will produce a little bit of water, which then causes a beetle to come out. Otherwise, they're extremely well hidden. Next. Lots of rare bugs at Sandwich Bay, for instance, in Kent. And next. Cornwall, again, some interesting bugs, including at this particular site I was looking at Sennan Cove. And next, that's in Cornwall, again, some specialities. And the next one, please. Dashing across to Sussex at this time for bees and some other rare insects, including silver spotted skipper. On to the next. Mountains. That's a mountain ringlet. This one was the Honiston Pass in Cumbria. And next one. They're of course found in Scotland and elsewhere as well. Talking of Scotland, I'm showing this especially for Sarah up in the Cairngorms, Scottish Highlands, some fantastic sites up there. On to the next one. Checkered skipper is a speciality of the Highlands. And the next. And the good old wood ant, lots of different species up in the Highlands, which all have different size nests, and they look very similar. Next. Other species from the Highlands. On the far right, bottom right, you've got a beetle that looks something like a bee, but is obviously just trying to disguise itself. Next. And not forgetting Ireland. I showed this slide because this particular wasp, it took me till the last minute really of time, a week doing a survey at this particular site to find that wasp, and it's the only time I've ever seen it. Next please. And the Burren has something like the shrill carder bee, so called because you're going to hear it coming. Next. Another site in Wales. These beetles, as I mentioned, are even found under tyres as well as driftwood. Next site. I think we're probably running out of time here, but I'll very quickly, for the benefit of our stick insect searchers, have a look at the next slide or two. That's fine, that's St Mary's where one lands. These are the stick insects at the old churchyard. Okay, and on to the next one. Plenty more stick insects and a different type of earwig there. And I think we're about done, David. You'll be pleased to know.
Okay, we'll stop share then. Firstly, I want to say that those images are absolutely fantastic. Really bright, vibrant pictures, so well done. And plus, obviously, telling us all about those insects, incredible. Yeah, we are kind of over time, so what we're going to do is we're going to ask that question that has people quaking in their shoes and in their chairs, and that is, the question for you is, what is your favorite insect?
Okay, well, I've got to say prickly stick insect, which some of you might have seen right at the end. It's found mainly in the West Country. Okay,
nice succinct answer, thank you. I want to quickly tell you guys, Zoomers, everyone, that tonight, or should I say, tonight's the first of the series. Tomorrow night, would you believe there's a guy called David Lindo coming on talking about Cáceres, which is a province, the northern province of Extremadura in Spain, and there's lots of bountiful birding to be had there. So basically, it's a talk about the birds and locations that you may not have heard of if you have been to Extremadura. On Thursday, the 7th of October, we've got Christopher Leahy. He's an American ornithologist who's written a book called Birdpedia, and it's all about trivia. So if you want to know some trivia, he's the man to talk to. Sarah Fowler is going to be with us on Monday, the 25th of October, talking about sharks. She's actually, she's actually written a book, a field guide to sharks, or sea guide, maybe. But anyway, that's a really fascinating subject, and she'll be here on Monday, the 25th. On Wednesday, the 27th, we've got Ben Hoare, who's a writer, works with the BBC Wildlife magazine. He's written a book, he's written several books, but one book's called Wild Cities. He's going to be talking about some of the wildlife that shows up in cities around the world. Should be very fascinating. On Monday, the 1st of November, we have Amy Jane Beer back again. She's got another book out. It's called A Tree a Day, and she's going to be talking about the trees between the days. And finally, so far, on Monday, the 15th of November, we've got a guy called John Dunn. I love this guy's writing. He's written a book called The Glitter in the Green, and it's about hummingbirds, in search of hummingbirds. So there's all that stuff coming up, plus more. So keep an eye out on the on social media. And by the way, today is an historic day. The world's gone to pot. Would you believe, Paul, that not Twitter, but Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram are all down? So we are in the best place. Instead of staring at our phones, we are actually here learning about insects. How's that, eh?
And that's fantastic. Even if we do have technology problems sometime, or particularly that I must say is my first Zoom meeting with a camera, to be honest. So
well, you did well.
Let me off for that.
No, you've done well, Paul. We're very proud of you. Before we go, I just want to say that if you are not a member of the Urban Bird of World membership, then maybe you should consider so, because until the end of the October the 31st, we're offering silver membership, excuse me, at £20 instead of £50. And it may sound like a load of money, but it's over a year. And I think what you get for it is quite phenomenal, in that you get lots of benefits in terms of discounts on goods and services to do with urban birding, as well as opportunities to get on board on courses, both online and outside, ranging from yoga for birders, nature writing with Stephen Moss, through to how to be an urban birder and all that sort of stuff, plus lots of free stuff as well. So look it up. And if you do consider it, then when you do join, punch in the code TUBW-20-silver, and I think all in capitals, and I think that Maya will put it in the chat for you. So I must close the show now. Paul, thank you very much for enlightening us with the world of insects. We're going to continue this conversation in Q&A, but thank you very much, Paul. Yeah, that's all I can say. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Great.
Thank
Oh,
you.
and before we say goodbye, don't forget, keep looking up.